Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got in this situation. Let's just say knowledge comes at a price, my friends. And one day, I took a job that got me in way over my head.
I've got a new lead and a trickster of a killer. Got my squad chasing shadows. He leaves a calling card.
I'll look into it.
I never did, thank you.
And you'll never have to.
How did I escape, you ask? Irrelevant. What matters is I'm here now, and you're about to learn how to save Azeroth from the devil of the Undermine. Today's report: 5 more reasons Jastor Gallywix, the King of Diamonds, has been compromised by Dreadlords. We'll start by covering some juicy details from the novel Before the Storm, where Sylvanas Windrunner is approached by Gallywix after the Legion's defeat. When Gallywix makes his move to tell Sylvanas about his intent to speak with her at length about Azerite, Sylvanas notes how on this particular day, Gallywix doesn't even seem like his usual self. Quote, Sylvanas had lived a very long life. She had spent much of that time looking into faces, judging the character behind them and the words that were spoken. Gallywix often had that sort of hail fellow well-met artificial cheer that she so despised. But not today. There was no desperate push from him. He was calm. He looked like a player who knew he was going to win. That he so boldly addressed her here now meant that he was serious about speaking with her. But his body language, he wasn't hunching obsequiously but stood straight for perhaps the first time she'd ever seen, told her even more clearly that this was someone willing to walk away from the table without undue disappointment. Yeah, maybe it's just the Azerite on his cane boosting Gallywix's ego a bit more than usual. But when framed against Sylvanas Windrunner's dealings with the jailer, the prophecy he told her about Azerite, and the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis appearing to her during this time, Gallywix's unusual confidence feels rather suspect. And perhaps this was the one hint Sylvanas herself overlooked when dealing with Gallywix that day. Now we move to the iconic whisper of the old god growth, Il'gynoth. The King of Diamonds has been made a pawn. Before we get into the meaning of the phrase, the King of Diamonds, I'll quickly address the Magnetar in the room, the crystalline dwarf king, Magni Bronzebeard. In Battle for Azeroth, Azshara taunted us with the fact that Magni played the role of N'Zoth's pawn. Here's the thing. The Void operates in 1,000 truths. Every single Old God quote has been crafted for us to find various true interpretations. And quite frankly, Magni wasn't much of a reveal since he was in our sights as the prime suspect. So, let's get into the King of Diamonds as a playing card, and its known meanings in cartomancy and tarot practice. The King of Diamonds symbolizes a master of wealth, power, and strategy. This card represents someone who thrives in the world of business, using cunning in a position of power to stay ahead, just like Gallywix. Unlike Magni, who was transformed into the Speaker to serve Azeroth, Gallywix embodies the self-made master, driven by personal gain rather than servitude. Where Magni's role is defined by his caring connection to the world, Gallywix's manipulation of Azerite in his relentless pursuit of profit align him perfectly with the King of Diamonds' typical focus on material dominance. And I mean, look at the guy. He's practically a walking playing card right out of the Diamond Suite, with his snow-white cape and brilliant red gems. To top it all off, we'll be fighting Gallywix in a casino, the exact place you encounter playing cards like the King of Diamonds. Seems to me that Gallywix has one mean poker face. Continuing with new evidence from patch 11.1, Undermined, the meaning of the extra D added onto the end makes this title into a pun, and it may just be a big clue to the shenanigans afoot. In the English language, the term undermine is usually defined by events of sabotage. Quote, to lessen the effectiveness, power, or ability of, especially gradually or insidiously. You see, from what we can tell, if there's no big twist with Gallywix in patch 11.1, then the story ends up being a repeat of the Nerubian threat. Xal'atath leverages a corrupt leader to gather black blood of the old gods in service of her upcoming dark plans. Really? First Queen Enzarek and now Gallywix? I'm not buying it. Whether it's crafty old Gallywix undermining Xal'atath for his own gain, or a Dreadlord compromised Gallywix in his place, the Dark Heart is not gonna be fixed without a twist. And depending on Xal'atath's allegiances, she may even lose her precious trinket to the corpulent Dreadlord Deathrok, hiding in plain sight. Whether it's our heroes, Xal'atath, or Gallywix himself, someone's getting undermined in this patch. Now, let me drop some lore on ya. In the real-world book, Folk and Fairy Tales of Azeroth, there is a story titled The Uninvited Guest. In this spooky bedtime tale, we learn about goblin funerals. And get this, a dark, spiritual entity that feeds off of their greed. Sound familiar? This so-called uninvited guest aligns eerily well with what we know about the Nathrezim, the Dreadlords, often referred to as the unseen guests. And in real-world vampire lore, one of the cardinal rules is that a vampire cannot enter your home unless it's invited. The Nathrezim thrive on sin, slipping unseen into society's uninvited, just like this mysterious shadow in goblin folklore. Perhaps this entity has been lurking in Khazan for generations, subtly feeding on the greed of its inhabitants and leading goblinkind further into sin as a means to satiate themselves with anima-rich souls. The goblin city of Undermine, with its cutthroat capitalism and rampant avarice, would be the perfect staging ground for such a crop to harvest. The story of the uninvited guest might not just be a silly tale, it could be a warning. Finally, let's break down the neutral evil character alignment. A perfect descriptor for Jastor Gallywix, whether he's just himself, or even more so if Deathrok is wearing his mask. Description from the D&D Player's Handbook defines two types of characters that fit neutral evil. A neutral evil character is typically selfish and has no qualms about turning on allies of the moment, and usually makes allies primarily to further their own goals. A neutral evil character has no compunctions about harming others to get what they want, but neither will they go out of their way to cause carnage or mayhem when they see no direct benefit for themselves. And number two, another valid interpretation of neutral evil holds up evil as an ideal, doing evil for evil's sake and trying to spread its influence. An example of the second type would be a masked killer, who strikes only for the sake of causing fear and distrust in the community. And here we see a picture so clear that Gallywix, this King of Diamonds, as the pawn of the infiltrating forces of the Dreadlords, rounds off the character's already accurate alignment of neutral evil in all ways. So, what does this mean for the future of our little green friend? If Gallywix has truly been compromised, the ramifications could shake the very foundations of the world. Gallywix's actions in the war within, whether guided by his insatiable greed or the insidious influence of a Dreadlord, are about to endanger us all. So I ask you to consider this. For such a slimy goblin as Gallywix, what kind of poetic justice do you think he's due? Should we let Xal'atath devour him in her dark heart, echoing Bane's comments from years ago? Or we could consider that Gallywix has already been eaten by this lug of a Dreadlord, Deathrok. What I think would be very fun to see is if in Deathrok's first defeat in Undermined, the real Gallywix is let loose from his master's dominating grip, much like Deathrok had done with Garithos in Warcraft 3, leaving the pitiful goblin to our clouded judgment, and forcing us to wonder which actions were Gallywix and which actions were Deathrok. You can already imagine Gallywix pleading this very case for himself, and it's juicy. A character like Thrall might regret his decision to ever let Gallywix live, deciding to take action and end it once and for all.
You disappoint me, Gallywix.
Thrall raises his axe high, ready to dispense some indiscriminate justice. But Anduin Wrynn steps in, stopping Thrall's axe with his father's blade, now his Shalamayne.
Thrall, his fate is not for us alone to decide.
Anduin, who has faced the horrors of domination firsthand, will plead to Thrall, echoing the Siege of Orgrimmar and humbling Thrall to see the boy king living up to his father's legacy. I mean, this stuff writes itself. So there you have it. 5 more reasons that Jastor Gallywix is the King of Diamonds. A pawn for the Nathrezim Dreadlords. I appreciate your time today, because as every goblin knows,
Time is money, friend!
be sure to hit like and subscribe across our platforms for more speculative lore. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Knowledge Wars, where the truth isn't just out there, it's buried under layers of goblin gold and titan machinery. And remember, folks, you are the resistance to the Nathrezim World Order.